Hello and welcome, everybody. You are here with RCR Talk, and I am Maree Buscke. Joining me, as always, every week is my friend, my collaborator, brother from another mother, Marty Gibson. Welcome to Media Matters. Oh, we've had a big week. We've got to see each other in person. We've done some cool stuff. It's been great.
Yeah. No, we should have done one of those carpool karaoke's in our trip. It was in a beautiful
Yeah.
part of the country. We went down to Foxton and had a chat to some VFF folks down there, thanks to our most enduring and passionate supporter, Mike from Foxton.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful. Great to Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, Mike and Tina run a great hub down there, and that hub is used by so many of the other chapters. And they all came together, and it was a great evening. You got to meet Catherine Ennis Carter in person finally, which was fun.
That was hilarious.
It was. It was. No, it was a really wonderful time. And you and I did a sort of a live version of Media Matters for everybody, which when I saw the video back, it was kind of like the Shamu and Stretch show. But I didn't realize how funny we were.
I prefer Laurel and Hardy.
You prefer Laurel and Hardy? Oh, actually, I can do a bowler hat and a little.
Yeah, we could do some sort of tap dancing.
We could actually. Yeah, I feel an AI image coming on.
I think I already did one. I just didn't think. I thought you thought it wasn't funny.
No, I didn't. Oh, anyway. Look, we had a great time. So thank you to everyone that made the effort. And the big thing that came out of that was the importance of our community and getting together. And getting together, being in person, and just, through all the noise that goes on, that interpersonal content, that interpersonal connection is so vitally important. And even for you and I, like we had a great few hours, 2.5 or so hours driving down and driving back. You introduced me to some new music, which I liked. It was good. And we solved the problems of the world there and back too. It was awesome.
You're spot on about the interpersonal contact. Yeah, and that's I guess where our regular listeners will find themselves on familiar ground. We've got to just recrystallize back into natural human groupings of about 120, and the idea of equality has brought with it the idea that differences imply hierarchy of value, and that's not the case. There's nothing like being in a group of people that's functioning as a single organism. And I think particularly with the challenges that we're going to face with AI, it's going to be far better for us. I'm calling it now. It's going to be far better for us to relate to AI as groups of 120, because you're going to have one or two people like Mr. Buscke who are really good at that and would be the best person to talk to that particular golem.
Absolutely. And you delegate out to people's strengths, don't you? And we saw that too in the hub as well. And when you've got a community, I think whenever life throws you lemons, which, they seem to be throwing lemons left, right, and centre at the moment. It's that group of that cohesive group that looks at it and goes, right, we're going to make lemonade. If it were me, I'd be making limoncello. You'd be doing all of those things to get yourself through. So thank you very much to the team down there for your hospitality. We did greatly appreciate it. Hey, there was also some really fantastic content. One of the things that I listened to on Friday before we headed down was Paul did an interview with Shane Jones, which is not unusual. Shane's a regular here on RCR. Very generous with his time, letting us know where things are going. He was on in his capacity as Associate Minister of Energy, and just he was talking about where the situation with things were. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the interview, he popped out this wee line, which was, I think, in reference to the immigration situation, which we know is a huge issue for New Zealand First. You've also got the fact that New Zealand First are against the fair trade agreement with India, which is now forcing Christopher Luxon to look across the aisle for support. And he just popped out this wee comment as easy as it just sort of slipped on out, which was about a chicken tsunami. It's got a touch viral, Marty. It seems like, they can't quite bring themselves in the legacy to contribute it to us. So
Yeah.
it is the hot topic. As somebody who is in an Anglo-Indian family, as you are, you've talked about it before, you you said to me, you were like, I am perfectly poised for this discussion. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Well, I
Thoughts?
did interview an Indian this morning and asked her what she thought, whether she was offended by it. And her comment was, everyone loves butter chicken. What's wrong with it? My younger daughter, who also enjoys butter chicken, said she would surf the wave of butter chicken while eating it. And my son said he didn't like butter chicken. I should remember that. And then launched into a racist rant about all the tsunamis he's faced. There's a tsunami of Asians. There's a tsunami of Indians. There's a tsunami of South Africans. There's a tsunami of gingers, and they've got a tsunami of freckles.
Yeah, right. Out
But
of the
I think
mouths of
what
babes.
was absolutely missed in the rush to be holier than thou in all of this was what a fantastic analogy it is. Because we've seen that Piers Morgan baby boomer, oh, but think of the food that comes with the gang rape of minors. You know, and butter chicken, of course, is, it's like the New Zealand equivalent of tikka masala, which was, of course, the Indian dish specifically made to bridge the gap between what Indians actually eat and what British people like to eat. And so it alluded to that. And Winston Peters was more specific about that on one morning show this morning. He said, we don't need more chefs. And I mean, there's that Rowan Atkinson skit. Well, now we have the recipe. Could some of you maybe just, okay, first stage of my failure of my microphone stand, could some of you maybe go home? And so that has been the way multiculturalism has been sold to dismantle the West. And I mean, I think
What I just had this heaving sigh over was the media's lazy interpretation, where in that post had the first thing, is it racist? Is it racist? That's all they could, that was the only question that they could ask. And they played ping pong in the post cab with Christopher Luxon. Just, is it racist? Is it racist? So, you're missing the much larger picture. Now, Shane Jones has said, I often use hyperbole to start a discussion and conversation. He hasn't backed down from the conversation at all. And so I actually had a look at also, we work with Jazz Preet Boparai, who is her South Indian, and she posted, I flicked it to you this morning, I don't know whether you had a chance to read it, but she posted something that was dropped last month in March. And it was from the Indian Weekender, which is a newspaper targeting specifically the New Zealand Indian community from 18 March, and we'll make sure the link is in the show notes. And it is called "Silence is Not Loyalty: Why Kiwi Indians Must Speak Out Against Fraud and Abuse." And when Jazz Preet posted it, she said it's actually really refreshing to see this sort of thing being posted. And the article was about those Indian communities that have been in New Zealand since the 1800s. And I think you can talk to this more, saying all Indians are the same culturally, from a theocratic perspective, or even from a socioeconomic and caste perspective, is like saying that all Māori are the same. You can't do it, can you, Marty? There is a lot of nuance and a lot of difference. So just sort of run people a little bit about that, and then we can set the stage and talk about this article, because I think this article is a good way to actually frame the relationship, the positives and the negatives of the community in New Zealand, because we're not here to bag the Indian community. The Indian community bring great richness to this country, both culturally and financially, but with every positive, there is a negative.
well, yeah, I mean, we've been corralled into talking about race when really we're talking about culture. And I can, with a clear conscience, poke shit at Indians with the same clear conscience that I poke shit at Māori. I like them, and some of them I love. And yeah, I mean, Winston Peters said this morning, we have a stack of Indians who have contacted me about what's wrong with this deal. It's a mistake to think all Indians think the same. Absolutely. And if our government is importing Indian people en masse, without acknowledging that there are some areas of their culture that are problematic and are going to flow through, much like the Muslim predilection for having sex with minors, or the rape isn't really rape if it's an infidel. There is just this acceptance of corruption. Something I'll say for the Indians who live in Papamoa, and there are quite a few living here, there's no rubbish. So, which is, if you go to India, it's a trash heap. There's just rubbish dropped on the streets and rivers. So, a lot of them have really altered that part of their culture. You don't see, there was that video of someone fly tipping recently, but I think that the Indian community here must be acknowledged for having made some change. It could be a lot worse than it is. But yeah, I think we need to really have a good look at all cultures that we're importing with an eye to, well, what do we have to look out for? I spoke with a senior policeman in Gisborne at one point, and this was when the Rotherham stuff was first coming out. And I said, have you got an eye out for that within your local communities? It just wasn't even on his radar at all. I don't think they're doing anything because it goes against the multiculturalism is our strength. There's no data
And
bears that out. It's our weakness.
and that is too the danger. And this is why when you have all the Labor politicians, everyone, is it racist? Is it racist? Is it racist? And as you said, they're looking at race and not looking at culture. And this is what they want you to do. This is what they want you to do, because this is part of the critical theory, racist division that they like to create amongst citizens of a nation, because using the word racist against any conversation in any sphere just shuts a conversation down. It censors, it divides. And as I said to you in a message this morning, before you know it, it's like, welcome, comrades. This is exactly what they're wanting to do. They're not looking at the cultural differences. I think that there are, and it doesn't matter when you've got mass migration from any group that come in as a collective, and in the case of the Indian community, and we saw it here in New Zealand actually with the mass migration of the Asian community of the 1990s. I was living in Auckland at that time. Is that the communities that have been here, that part of the community that has been here for multi-generations, they have gone and created their own Kiwi, Indo-Kiwi, Chinese way of doing things. You have ones come in, and often what they will do is integrate and have them say, right, well, that's may have been how you did things in Mumbai. This is actually how we do things in Masterton.
Yeah, and
There is a difference.
I had a thought about that this morning when I was watching Winston Peters on the news, and that is that there are different types of integration. One is not multiculturalism, it is assimilation. And so, say my wife's Indian, she sounds like she's on Coronation Street. She was part of that wave of professionals, or her father was, in the UK in the 70s. He's a pediatrician. They moved there when she was 2, and she grew up culturally as British. I went to a wedding, her brother's wedding, north of London, which was in a 1,000-year-old monastery. And so my experience of Indian people, India is more diverse than Europe within itself. There's tremendous difference in people. And of course, within that, you've got castes. Now, the Indians I hang out with are, as we're walking up to the wedding, there's just Bentleys and Maybachs, and there's a lot, and the kids are so charming. They've got British accents, they've got that British wit, but it's combined with the still strong cultural thing. Indian people do Manaki tanga and Whanaunga tanga. They really mean it. They don't just talk about it. So, it occurred to me that you and I are descended from the equivalent within New Zealand. I mean, obviously you've got Māori in you as well. But our ancestors, when my great-great-grandmother was the first white woman born in Poverty Bay, born in Turanganui Kiwa, as it was called before it was changed to Gibson because people got confused with Tauranga. there were only 50 white folks living there. So they had to fit in or they'd be in big trouble. You know, we're descended from that link with Maori, which is, as I said, why I guess I'm comfortable in that world and I can criticize them sometimes in a loving way. But after, you know, there was an early settler, and I tried to remember his name, was going to research it, didn't have time. But there was an early family who moved there, small guy who lived there, and he was a really early settler, and he paved the way for later migrants from Britain because he could speak Maori, had a Maori wife. Now, to their shame, the later migrants shunned him after they were settled and safe because he had gone native, because he'd because he got married a Maori woman. I've often thought there should be a statue of him and his wife in Gisborne because that's the point of assimilation where it works, where you respect each other's difference. You have to change. You're changed by it. But later you have these enclaves, which has led to, if in Gisborne City, and this isn't completely universally the case, but in a lot of cities in New Zealand or centres, there are very few native trees. You know, there's a lot of elms, a lot of oaks, because native bush was where Maoris hid, or before sweeping down to kill you. So they sort of wanted to make this place a little England, and I can understand why Maori objected to that in some ways.
And also too, that it's because, I mean, my Māori heritage comes from European Māori marriages. I mean, my mother's family, I mean, he was the Jose Manuel. I mean, and you reported as you were telling me,
I
actually,
was
I
their
didn't
pet
realize that.
reporter, yeah.
Yeah, the pet reporter for the whānau, and you know, I'm descended off. I mean, he took 5 Māori wives,
Mm.
not all at the same time, I'd like to add, but he was a busy chap. He had 5 wives. I'm descended off the very last wife, and I mean, by that stage, I mean, he was well into his 70s, I think, when the one child from that union was born.
Well, my
My
great-great-grandfather, who would have lived alongside your ancestors, I might add, at Waipiro Bay, a very small settlement, and he lived there about the same time. He had a Maori wife before my great-great-grandmother, who was actually the first person locked up on the East Coast for domestic violence, I might add. Yeah, that's a whole other story. So, yeah, I have a lot of Maori whanaunga
but
through
it
that.
is those connections and integration. Now, it's what I have to admit is so interesting with Shane Jones's comment. It has created all of this conversation. And just going back to this article that Jazz Preet said, that so the article prefaces there was a run of quite well-known crimes that had actually been perpetrated that hit the headlines, and unfortunately there was Indian involvement. A lot of it is quite relatively recent immigrants. So this is a section from this article. The betrayal harms the majority of us who run honest businesses, pay our staff fairly, and teach our children to do the same. But insisting that most of us are good people won't bring fairness. We should call out bad behaviours and stop shielding them behind the veil of silence. For too long, when someone from our community has done wrong, we have looked the other way. We let the courts handle it, avoiding a scene. Some community leaders quietly suggest we shouldn't discuss these matters publicly, arguing it gives ammunition to racists. Now, you could actually apply that across Māori as well.
Yeah.
And
I was hopping from foot to foot to say that. Wouldn't that be great to hear? And again, we get away from race. You know, there's good people of all kinds, and there's scumbags of all kinds. And the real division is between the good folks and the scumbags. And the scumbags have got to go.
mm, mm, absolutely.
But though, yeah, that was a
Absolutely.
fantastic article. I'd commend it to our listeners to read. And it's a great point for us, you know, for us as a nation to say, you know, start answering the question, well, how do we integrate this? And it's a shame that, as I said, we're beyond that point where, and you would have met Kiwi Indians, they've got the strongest Kiwi accents of anyone.
Even new immigrant Indians that I've met, like there's a young couple that I know. They're married. She's Filipino, he's Indian, and I've had the pleasure of meeting both her family and his family. We've gotten to know them over the last 5 or 6 years. This young couple are so hardworking, so
They've got
hardworking.
3 jobs.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like
The
little
role model for
entrepreneurial
Kiwis.
businesses. Yeah, so
You've got to work like
hardworking.
coolies.
And, they got married. They were very young to get married. They were both only like 21 or 22 when they got married. They bought their first house. They're not worried about whatever the latest new gadget or the trip or big night out or whatever is. When they do something special, it's a real occasion and they do it sparingly. They work their tripes out, they save, and, they have the spirit that so many Kiwis had, particularly in our generation and the generation before, that seems to have disappeared with the
You
millennials.
you know why? Because
Why?
they're
Tell
1
me
or 2
why.
generations, same as South Africans. They're
Mm.
1 generation, um, behind us in the disintegration of their culture. For the West, it was the baby boomers and the sexual revolution lit the fuse on the collapse that we're now in the middle of. And Indians, it's just this generation or the last generation or 2. So as I said, a lot of those values are still very much there, which does make them great New Zealanders. It's not going to last. And so that's the point of where we do need to come together and look at what we're facing down, not as race and not even completely as culture, but we need to understand this is inevitable. When you remove the stigma from premarital and extramarital sex, you can say that dispassionately. It's not moralizing. Your society starts to break down, and we're 3 generations on, which is what Unwin, who I often talked about, said in his study of 54, collapsed civilization was just like clockwork. 3 generations before it collapses, because you don't have young men putting all of their energy into gaining status, gaining skills, gaining good character so they can have access to marriage and thus sex. They've got it in their rooms on their laptops, and so you've just got this tremendous dissipation of energy.
Yeah. So one of the things that I believe Shane Jones was wanting to do is by seeding that comment. And I don't know whether he just did it. It just happened to pop out because it's Shane. Stuff pops out.
No,
Or whether it was,
as I said, it was a great analogy.
yeah. Ginny Anderson and Mark Mitchell were doing political on ZB this morning, and this came up. And as Mark Mitchell said, it isn't helpful. Those comments aren't helpful. Ginny's on her high horse. This is racist. This is racist. She's following the Labour caucus line. Everybody's posting on Facebook the Tova Chris Hipkins clip because Chris was strong. That was leadership. He's banging his nice little student politician Marxist drum. Anywho, what it has done is there is elements of that free trade agreement that do require clarification and conversation. Shane Jones, by seeding that comment, has actually done that. And Ginny did bring up this one element that was very elastic about what the number of jobs and people and coming to New Zealand meant. Todd McClay won't clarify that. And Mitchell was also trying to sort of say, oh, well, no, this is what this means. It's sort of trying to brush it off. But Ginny Anderson had a point. There is a clarification that is required there. If you want to cross the aisle and get our support, we need to know what this is. New Zealand First have out and out said, they ain't a good deal. There's too much going on here that we don't like, particularly around these lacks of clarification. So in a way, has New Zealand First managed to get this discussion out into the zeitgeist, into the media, by seeding this hyperbolic comment?
Oh, well, I mean, there's a few things there. First of all, Chris Hipkins.
Yeah, it is racist, and Winston Peters needs to do something about it.
The something, which is a dog whistle. Jacinda Ardern uses as well. It means I'm as thick as you. I'm too thick to really hurt you. I don't know why he says that, but yeah. Anyway, Yeah, it needs clarifying, but I think that Christopher Luxon's comment that Indians are should be a role model for New Zealanders because they take 3 jobs, that takes you to the chumocracy that Rob talks about, McCulloch, sorry, where he's just meeting with oligarchs. And what oligarchs want is cheap labor. They want to drive down the cost of labor. It used to be if you went around and you saw a truck, you'd look in the cab, 60, 70% of the time there'd be a Māori driving it. Now, 60, 70% of the time you look and there's an Indian guy driving it. And it's surprising to me, and it's possibly because they've got the same interest as the oligarchs, why the iwi leaders aren't picking up on this. It's disastrous for an already underemployed Māori population. You know, I mean, my old man went to school in Te Karaka. He went to Waiku College, which was mostly Māori. And he said in those days, everyone had a father, and the father was always working. You've seen an inversion of that. It's
Yeah.
rare that there's a father living in the house, and it's, common for them to be generationally unemployed.
So is there an element then of, with this free trade agreement, that they're wanting to bring in, so that chumocracy of Indian oligarchs, they're wanting to bring in this mass migration of Indians of cheap labour that will work under the same assumptions of how cheap labour operates in India, and they need to get them before they actually understand that the rights and privileges they have as an employee here in New Zealand.
Well, that's one level of it, and that's why they did it in the UK. But there's another layer to it, which is this hatred and wanting to dismantle nations, and that's why Western countries have been hosed down with migration in a way that China hasn't, in a way that India hasn't, in a way that Africa hasn't. Creating those sort of divisions stops people working out who's shagging them and how badly. It sets us against each other, which is why I'm saying that article in the article that Jaspreet sent in that's the right path that we got to be on for this. As I said, there are a lot of really great characteristics of Indian people, and there's some not so good. I asked my wife once, and she's don't know. I asked my wife once, would you want to go and live in India for a year? Should we do that? She said, oh no. And I said, why not? She said, oh, because Pundis are so disorganized, and I hate disorganization. And yeah, if you go, I mean, I've driven 2 hours through the outskirts of Mumbai through a shanty town. It's utter chaos. And, there's all these posters for people who want to get elected. And if you talk to the people, they just accept they're corrupt. So there should be no surprise when it's popping up. And those same people who were cheating in the elections are going again. Somehow there's just this reluctance to enforce electoral law, which we're going to have to rethink.
Mm. So this is a conversation that you brought out there. You brought also electoral law as well. There's been a collection of polls, and with this collection of polls, there has been the fervour from the legacy media of Luxon must go. Now, a couple of shows ago, I gave you the theory because at that time, a couple of shows ago, it was Chippy that was getting a lot of pressure on him from what he did and didn't know in the timeline in regards to the COVID inquiry. All of this stuff is a great distraction for those with the media because, of course, they want to get that off their sacred cow, which is Chris Hipkins, because they love the little ginger. They love him. They love him. They really do. And so the poor polling from National in recent weeks and months has certainly been great fodder for them. Bryce Edwards did a really good piece about it, just sort of looking at all of it. And he pulled some graphs out which sort of combines all the polls together. And there was one big thing that I saw with these polls is that whilst Labor has had a solid trajectory up since the beginning of last year, right, and National has had a solid trajectory down, when you look at the minor parties, because let's face it, neither of them can do it alone. They got to have friends. So traditionally, if you are in government, your minor parties will suffer under in the coalition. We saw that with New Zealand First from 2017 to 2020, which ended up Labour going it alone. What we have now is a coalition where National has actually dropped down. Both ACT and New Zealand First have remained pretty steady. ACT sort of bobs up and down, but it's within Kiwi. New Zealand First has had a massive increase in its support, more than doubled since the election. Meanwhile, across the other side of the aisle, you see both the Greens and Te Pāti Māori lose support. We're still so far out from the election. Christopher Luxon has now had to face this supposed leadership coup. He's gone in, he's pulled the caucus together, he's obviously eyeballed them and come out with, no, we're all good in the hood. What's your read on all of this? Is it distraction? Is it poor discipline? Is it just a whole bunch of hot air to try and distract us from the real shit that's actually going on, like a fuel crisis?
Yeah. It's the 65% of people who is Labour plus National supporters, pretty strongly similar to the 65% of people who keep giving people shocks in the Milgram experiment. And it was interesting, again, watching that Tova interview with Winston Peters. This will be yesterday morning when this comes out. Winston Peters gave the strongest indication that he wasn't going to go with Labour that I've heard him so far. He said, I'm trying to make it clear the responsibility of New Zealand First is to maintain stability until the election. And of Labour, he said, how can you form a government with people with serious communist Marxist bent? The other thing he said, which was interesting, was Christopher Luxon didn't ask me for my views. He said there's no substitute for experience in a crisis. So it surprises me that Luxon's not. Maybe he thought, well, I'm a global leader. I can handle this. This is what I get paid the big money for. I can do this. I've got in his mirror while he was shaving his head. It's surprising me that he's not friendly enough with Winston Peters to be saying, what do you reckon? I read a statement by Luxon this morning. I didn't include it in my notes, but you can hear Rachel Smalley all over it. You can hear that she's said to the 20-something PR chicks, go and make me a cup of coffee. I'm gonna clean up some of your mess.
Well, the post-caucus meeting had her fingerprint all over it. He came out, he read a 2-minute statement, and he prefaced it straight away. I'm not taking questions. Mikey Sherman, so I made the fatal mistake of watching One News. After that, I thought, I need to do that ahead of today. So I watched One News, which would have been, as I said, Monday night as this came out. And I saw that, I thought, right, that's the Smalley influence. And Mikey Sherman, honestly, somebody needs to give that girl a beta blocker. Just calm her down.
I started to read the Stuff article by Verity.
Watson?
Yeah. And I posted it. I said, nothing like an economics lesson from a functionally enumerate alcoholic chick with an arts degree, which wasn't necessarily just meaning her. It's sort of a generic
generalization
description of the average journalist who gets into the press pack. And it again, National the whole government could have saved themselves so much hassle if they had just said, okay, you don't have to meet the Willie Jackson's requirement of the Public Interest Journalism Fund, because a lot of those have a serious leftward bent. New Zealand's a systemically racist country that disadvantages Māori who never ceded sovereignty. Climate change is an existential threat, so they're not allowed to give both sides of the story, and yet there's a tension because their charter demands it. Somehow they can ignore the charter requirement for balance. That was John Campbell last week. Remember saying, well, it's important to me to give both sides of the story. He wasn't addressing the thing. We're sick of you. We'd like to have real balance, not just you. Well, I'm interviewing both people.
But it's the condescension as well from John Campbell, because didn't he in that same interview say, well, I've got a degree. Not everybody has a degree from Victoria University like I do.
Well, I sent you that Leo
Malloy.
Malloy. Sent you
Malloy,
that
yeah.
Leo Malloy thing. He's saying what I would like to say.
And, Verity Watson is, I think, quite a good example of a lot of the people that are sitting in legacy media. They are doing politics from what I call the
Yeah.
Ponsonby Road Beltway.
Yeah.
I mean, you're only going to be getting a very, very narrow view of the world. Actually, speaking of the Ponsonby Road Beltway, Chloe must be a bit disappointed. She came out with her big energy announcement, their big policy, their big state of a nation, and everyone's ignored it. Chloe wants to electrify New Zealand. No one cares.
Well, I mean, there's always going to be that. There's always going to be that personality disordered sector of the community that resonates with her. That histrionic, narcissistic. There's a study I came across, which is actually from 2023, but someone, according to the dark ego vehicle principle, individuals with so-called dark personalities, i.e. individuals with high narcissistic traits, are attracted to political and social activism, not for the achievement of pro-social goals, but to repurpose the activism to satisfy their specific ego-focused needs. Again, we've got to look at what's driving all of this. Another thing that I came across, which is kind of, I mean, I've spoken, like, looking at Christopher Luxon, I was thinking of Socrates' objections to democracy. He's kind of the embodiment of it. Socrates opposed democracy because he believed it allowed uninformed citizens and demagogues to make critical decisions, risking poor governments and societal instability. So he argued that governing a state is a skill similar to medicine or navigation. By giving equal political power to all citizens, regardless of their understanding, it enabled decisions to be made by those lacking the necessary judgment. So, and interesting, there was an MIT professor, Marvin Minsky, who made the same discovery about the internal workings of people themselves. So he wrote a book called The Society of Mind, and he said, what you experience as a single unified self-making clear-headed decisions is not a thinker. It is an outcome, the result of hundreds of tiny, specialized, mostly mindless agents competing. So you've got this democratic system that's made up of people doing that. And so, of course, it's chaotic. And that's the appeal of AI. But unfortunately, AI is being made by people who believe and are excited that they're building a golem, that they're building the beast from Revelation. So, the other interesting thinker that I came across was R.R. Reno, who published a book in 2019 called Return of the Strong Gods, Nationalism, Populism, and the Future of the West. And a central argument was that the open societies of modern liberal West were cultivated in reaction to the horrors of the 20th century associated with the closed society. And we've overcorrected in the opposite direction. And so that's very much a Jewish project, because their whole never again means they're going to dismantle the makings of those. And one of them is angry, ambitious, patriotic young men. They've got to go. So if you look at it in that light, a lot of the transvestitism, promotion of homosexuality, failure of the education system as far as boys are concerned makes perfect sense. So, those three things interested me.
Well, very much so. And you brought up populism there too, because have you noticed how populism tends to be a slur? It's
Yeah.
another one of these pejoratives that the media are throwing around. So I sort of thought, well, I'm going to look up the definition of populism because, to my mind, I'm thinking, well, and New Zealand First get this all the time, Winston Peters and New Zealand First is a populist party in New Zealand. I'm thinking, well, if populism is just your elected leaders or people within a party reacting to the constituents that want to support it, isn't that therefore democracy? Now, there are two. I mean, when you look at populism from a left and right perspective, right wing populism often focuses on nativism, cultural identity, immigration, and national sovereignty. Yeah, they're pretty much a big tick there for New Zealand First. That's pretty much covers them, right? I think it also covers a lot of people that are passionate about the nation in which they live. So I had a look at the definitions of populism. So, right-wing populism often focuses on nativism, cultural identity, immigration, and national sovereignty. I think New Zealand First has a big tick in that. And let's face it, any person that is in a country, as we go back to butter chicken tsunamis, you can actually have that sort of populism as an immigrant to this country if you're really integrated and you love it. That's the love of nation, isn't it? So this is what they term as right-wing populism. But here's left-wing populism, Marty, often focuses on economic inequality, opposing large businesses, advocating for the economic empowerment of the working class. Cultural Marxism, anybody? Just saying.
Well, the most recent criticism of New Zealand First for populist uh, thought was from Bryce, and he was saying it in response to their proposal that they break up the supermarket duopoly. Now, my thought about that, taking a devil's advocate view, was that the populism in that sense meant an idea that sounds good to most people who don't know what they're talking about. And, if you've ever worked in a fast-moving consumer goods business, they're incredibly complex and tough to manage. You've got to see a return on your investment. And it's the government bureaucrats with no skin in the game are always going to get outwitted by businesses because they just trying to tick the boxes and make things sound good. They're not committed to a certain outcome. So my thought was, well, if you wanted a genuinely populist solution to the supermarket problem, it's not the reflex that people in politics have to control, that Ahrimanic evil, that desire for total control that's embodied in the central bank digital currency that you could switch off if someone displays wrongthink. If you were going to do it in a genuinely populist way, you'd think, well, how can people feed themselves more efficiently than going to the supermarket and impulsively satisfying their whims for food? And it would be that you, again, recrystallize as people and you think, well, okay, what is the best thing for these people to eat and how can we supply that to them using economies of scale? And while we're doing it, how many problems can we solve at the same time? So can we educate people? Can we improve the environment? Can we improve productivity? Can we soak up some of the excess labor that we have in order to do this and compete? So offer people a genuine alternative to going to the supermarket, which would be to sign up with, and I think of it as, I've got a theory about this. I think of it as the trellis economy. Like people who are free market are very fond of just saying, well, whatever the demand is, business will satisfy. But we've got a central government, and if central government wanted to do anything, it would be to say, okay, we're going to embody our identity as a food-producing nation in the way we manage some of these problems. So as we do that, there are going to be opportunities for people to start businesses, and we don't necessarily have to have all of them replicating things that aren't their core strengths in terms of capitalization, in terms of bookkeeping, and so on. So within that, you could say, okay, well, as part of our identity as a food-producing nation, we're going to have the best hospital food in the world. We're going to, rather than just having a label, oh, look at this moldy sandwich that one of our delegates slipped into the supply to give Tova a press soundbite. we're going to ask the question, well, is it the best thing for our kids to be eating sandwiches that are made with wheat that's sprayed with glyphosate 2 weeks before harvest to minimize mold? What would we best feed people to reduce obesity, to improve health outcomes? If you ran that parallel to the supermarkets, you wouldn't have to legislate.
Well, so you bring up a great point in terms of that decentralization of our food supply. And unfortunately, as consumers, we have been corralled into the supermarket. So Shane Jones has, when you look at the policy in terms of breaking out the supermarket duopoly, I mean, I've worked in 2 businesses in sales, high-end sales and marketing and FMCG. I know how these supermarkets work. And I mean, when Shane Jones was in Labor trying to do this 20 plus years ago, 25, 2 dozen years ago, he was struggling to actually get people to open up within businesses to tell him what was going on. They wouldn't go on the record with it because they held such power to destroy those businesses if you went against them in the duopoly. So this for him has been a passion project. Then fast forward to 2017, they were in coalition. He's now in New Zealand First. And what is the one thing that Jacinda Ardern does is that she shuts down small businesses. This was an opportunity for small food producing businesses, vegetable businesses, bakeries, butchers. She refuses to allow them to open to be part of that critical business infrastructure and corrals all New Zealanders into the 2 supermarkets, all for safety and kindness. That to me has been so destructive. You know, good old Shane Jones for actually digging into this. And I think you're right. If you dig into this and break that duopoly up, what you also need to do is lift up and raise those small independent businesses that have had the absolute guts ripped out of them by the Labor government during the pandemic of, in 2020.
Well, I mean,
And
you'd say it
unfortunately,
was
New
for
Zealand First
kindness.
were there.
Yeah, I mean, you can. That's what she was telling us. No journalist in New Zealand really had the ticker to say what impact does her being a WEF young global leader whose originator of the organization said "We penetrates the cabinets," Klaus Schwab. How much of this was coming from him, and did she just roll that turd and glitter? Because it did. And yeah, surprise, surprise. She did what everyone did around the world, which benefited these huge corporations that sponsor the WEF. And I mean, that is pernicious. And the fact that we have to still pretend that she was trying to be kind rather than just saying she's a narcissist who was useful to implement this deeply anti-human agenda. And I mean, iwi, if iwi were really doing what they say they want to do, they'd be all over this. They'd be saying, hey, we've got all this land. They go, oh, we want our land back. How much gorse and blackberry do you want? Grow some beef to feed people. Grow, and it's always a thing with farmers. Oh, well, we're getting this export price, so we can't, it makes it too expensive for the domestic market. Well, grow some specifically to feed kids. We've got the land. We've got a lot of land that's underutilized. We've got excess labor. And if you've got something like a mixed agriculture model, it uses more labor, but it's far more productive. But people use a monoculture for the same reason people use identity politics. You have to use a bit more poison, but it's easier for a small number of people to manage.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Now, I know one other story I would like to look at, but I know you've also done a bit of prep. What have you got?
Well, I sort of went over it with that strong gods and demagogues bit, and I touched on that narcissistic people like identity politics thing.
You've actually just reminded me. I think I need to get Josh Slocum back.
Yeah.
Who's the guy? And actually just sort of have a take of everything from a global standpoint at the moment of where they fit into that cluster B personality disorder, because I think that would be fun. I haven't spoken to Josh for ages. If you want to look him up, I've done
They're
2
always
interviews with him.
Those interviews.
Cracking interviews. He's really fascinating. Disaffected is the name of his podcast. And he looks at global affairs and stories through the lens of the players and cluster B personality disorders. It's
Well, I'll
really
tell you what I've got really quick. 3 stories. Heather du Plessis-Ellens, basically this was before the vote of confidence came out, but she was saying Mark Mitchell's the guy. Erica Stanford's tempting because she has been outstanding in the education portfolio. She also reminds them of Ardern. It is largely because Stanford is a woman and no one knows much about her, but she would be a mistake. She's not well liked by caucus. It's always a warning sign when your colleagues don't really like you. So she said, yeah, Mark Mitchell is a bit dumb. His weakness is that he doesn't bring the intellectual heft that some of his colleagues do, but he's genuinely conservative. And she made the good point that Stanford will also end up having the same ideological problem as Luxon. Both are so liberal they could happily be in the Labour Party, and you could add Nicola Willis to that, the Gareth to Luxon's David Brent. But yeah, Mitchell is a true conservative. He will not angst over those policies to the same extent. He works in simple binaries like conservative voters. Police are good, gangs are bad. But like Jacinda Ardern, in my mind, it's simple. Richard Prebble, basically, was similar, reading the tea leaves and saying it's hard to imagine that an election campaign will fundamentally change the country's settled view of Luxon. Marginal seat MPs will not want the Prime Minister campaigning in their electorates. To continue with a leader whom the polls say voters do not want is to insist the voters are wrong. In politics, even when voters are mistaken, the voters are never wrong. And yeah, that's what we alluded to before. How come we've got this giant douche and turd sandwich choice between that little spotty ginger and that baldy Jacinda David Brent character? There must be someone better in New Zealand than that.
Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah, go on.
It was 2016, and I was watching the American election lead up intensely. So that was Trump and Hillary Clinton. And so I was watching all the debates, doing all the things. Back in the days when I still had Sky TV and doing all this on CNN. And my our son, who was 10 at the time, he comes into the room after school and he sees one of the debates, the candidate debates between Trump and Clinton, and I was watching it. And so he stands there. This is my ginger, and he's standing there and he's watching the debate. And he goes,
some of my best friends are ginger. I don't mean to be gingest against them.
No, I know. Yeah. It's okay. I'm good. Self-confessed. It's fine. And so he's standing there and he's looking at the debate unfold, and he says to me, "Who are these people?" And I said, "Oh, these are the people that are debating to be the next president of the United States, darling." And he goes, "So the orange guy and the grumpy old lady?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Is that all they've got to choose from?" And I said, "Yes." And he literally said, and you could get the bleep button out now, then he goes, "Well, they're fucked," and turned around and walked out the room. If a 10-year-old can see it. But anyway, the only other thing I want to do is hand out actually a bit of a bouquet into legacy media today. Again, Derek Cheng. Derek Cheng, bless his little heart. Yep. Bless your little heart, Derek, is a wee dog with a bone, and he is not letting our little spotty ginger off what transpired at the end of the COVID inquiry. And he did an excellent story on the 16th of April with the headline, "If it could have been avoided, families of sick children vent over not appropriate COVID vaccine rules." Online on the 16th of April. But full, huge review section of this past Saturday's print edition. He's not letting this go. He's spoken now to vaccine-injured children and parents of those children. You know, Derek, good on you. He's put out a timeline, which is a timeline that we also published as part of the People's Report.
Did he attribute
which you can download now. He did not, but you know what? We know Derek got it, right? And the fact that he's, if he used it, and it appears that it may have contributed to some of his reporting, but it is a very, very well in-depth piece. He also too took a swipe at Jacinda Ardern and looked at what she'd said, how she'd said it, and just
realized she was lying her ass off?
yes, and there was a quote in here from the hearing. I cannot tell you why, but I wonder if it's because essentially no one under the age of 17 essentially ended up being covered, the former Prime Minister replied during a hearing in October of 25. She wondered if the age specifications in the mandate, 12 and older, had simply followed the age range of who was eligible for the vaccine at the time. But the intention of Cabinet, it has been, it's obvious adults that it was covering, and the CV tag made the recommendation based, I imagine, on technically what was before them on paper.
In my mind, it's simple.
In my mind, that's simple. You know, he's also too had a crack at Chris Hipkins, who has basically tried to defer all the blame to Ashley Bloomfield.
God, he's like one of those rats who survives nuclear war because he can sense radiation, isn't he?
Yeah.
You know,
So, Derek, good on you for continuing to put this out there, but also to speaking to some of those who are vaccine injured. I don't know what the number is. Last time I checked with Linda Water, it was something like $16 million had been paid out to vaccine injured. And those are the very few, the tiny tip of the iceberg that have managed to get ACC claims accepted. So this is a huge problem. It's going to have a long ongoing cost. Good on you, Derek, for keeping it out there.
they lied, people died, they must be tried. The only other thing that I had was a good old Matthew Hooton. I noticed we did a short with me lengthily quoting him, and he's difficult to quote a little bit of because he's very, very abundant statistics, which are blood chilling in terms of how much crap we're in economically and how much momentum our decline has got. You know, that momentum is engineered to take us to a point where everyone demands universal basic income, which is going to be downstream of the digital ID, which is going to be downstream of the central bank digital currency that's linked up to an off button on our money if we say the wrong thing. But yeah, he was saying the Inland Revenue Department has joined Treasury, the Taxpayers Union, New Zealand Initiative, all major bank economists, and even with different emphases, the Council of Trade Unions and Tax Justice Aotearoa, in warning that New Zealand cannot go on much longer without serious spending cuts, big tax rises, or both. So the repayment on Squealer's billions is going to go to $13 billion a year, and that's money that's been pissed up against the wall with nothing productive to show for it. So yeah, we'll put the link in that. You can go over it. But
and when you combine that Hooton back with Bruce Cottrell's kamikaze cabinet last week, saying that someone needs to be brave and literally take a chainsaw to all of this and actually pull that cost out. But I mean, who's got the balls to do it?
Well, I think someone needs to be, if someone needs to be really brave, it's to say, hey, we just borrowed all this toilet paper money and now we're having to pay it back with the money that we're getting selling real sheep, selling real land, selling real assets. Unless people confront the Luciferian scam that is central bank fiat currency, the world owes far more money than the value of total assets that it holds. It's the chicanery where an elite group of people who like having sex with, torturing and murdering children in many cases have helped themselves too with the help of traitorous leaders. Eventually people are going to realize that we're owing, we can never pay it back. The system is designed, and because they now own everything, they own the media, so they can get people thinking a certain way. The only thing that we've got left that they want is our freedom, and they want total control over us.
Which is a chilling thought. They can at least stop Whiter Imby.
What's that?
Well, I just sort of, that is the bigger picture, right? But I mean, even if you was going into this next election round, you know, if you're wanting to cut out, this has been one of the criticisms, and I've seen this actually in a lot of comments, is that they're sort of saying, people are saying, well, New Zealand First promised this, or Shane Jones promised that, or Winston Peters, or Christopher Luxon. and that they haven't actually achieved a number of key promises in terms of cutting back, and particularly around areas of co-governance and government spending, that they haven't been able to achieve that. And part of that, I believe, is because Christopher Luxon just hasn't really, and Nicola Willis just haven't had the
He
appetite
hasn't got the steel.
to be able to do it. But also the other, and I've mentioned this before, there is a move within government departments, and the IMBY example with the Waiata is a good example of this. And I know that from people who work inside government departments, and we heard this in Foxton too, from somebody that works with governance, that there is a move, a group of people who vote in the opposite direction, that vote, they're wanting Labor back in, that are being as obstructive as they possibly can to the current coalition, so they cannot enact their policies. They're running it through the legal system, they're putting up barriers and barricades, they're making things decidedly difficult for the ministers, and the minister and the Prime Minister just simply do not have the chutzpah to just go, no, speak to the hand. This is going to happen whether you like it or not.
They could have avoided some of this with the media just by disconnecting Willie Jackson's PIJF conditions, but the media are also understanding that if they can get Labor back in, the spigot's going to turn on again into their troughs, and they'll be back, meat's back on the menu, boys. As the
exactly.
Exactly.
Right.
Someone told us that story about the teacher, the principal saying to his teachers at a meeting, don't worry too much about implementing these changes to the curriculum. It's, it might all change at the end of the year anyway. That is disgusting.
Yeah, what sort of attitude is that? I know, it's insane. Right, I think that's us for another week, my friend. We're going to do a big bumper mailbag next week, we've decided. So we've got it. There is a bit there, but we thought we'd do a nice big bumper mailbag next week. And make sure that you do check out some of the very, very good interviews, including the Butter Chicken Jones interview, if you haven't already caught it. And I also did speak to Davina Smolders as well from the Far North District Council. That was a fascinating conversation. Make sure you check that out too.
I'd just add, sorry, Maree, if you happen to be talking to a National Party MP, you should say to them, hey, why are you guys refusing to come on Reality Check Radio? What have we done?
Well, they're obviously listening, because butter chicken's gone everywhere. And that stain is really hard to get out.
Everyone loves butter chicken. What's wrong with that? In the words of a great Indian woman.
There you go. Well, take care. And remember, if you've got any feedback, 2057 is the text. Inbox at rcr.media is the email. And lest we forget, have a very good Anzac weekend this weekend, everybody. And we will see you all again next week.
Have a great weekend. I actually had dinner with some dipshits a couple of weeks ago. They were really nice people.
Well, there you go. Take care.